Big shock in the British royal family. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry are on the brink of a breakup. For those of us who've lived long enough to remember the quiet dignity of Queen Elizabeth II and the solemn charm of a young Prince Charles walking behind his mother with steadfast composure, the modern saga of the British royal family often feels like something from a completely different world. In recent years, few figures have stirred as much conversation, and indeed, as much controversy as Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Once hailed as a modern-day fairy tale, their story has taken yet another sharp turn, and for many of us watching from across the Atlantic, it's hard not to feel a sense of both curiosity and quiet concern. Word has recently emerged that Harry and Meghan have officially ended their working relationship with Netflix, the streaming giant that had until now been one of their main financial lifelines. This decision, while perhaps long brewing behind closed doors, has sent ripples not only through media circles but through the very foundation of their public identity. Since stepping away from royal duties in early 2020, a move that stunned even those who had grown used to royal surprises, Harry and Meghan have leaned heavily on their multi-million-dollar deal with Netflix. Through that partnership, they had produced documentaries and content meant to reflect their vision of the world, their values, and perhaps their effort to reclaim a voice they felt had been lost in the rigidity of palace life. But with that contract now dissolved, the couple faces a far more uncertain future. To those of us who've weathered our own seasons of hardship, it's not difficult to recognize the signs of financial strain. Reports suggest that the couple's bank accounts have been under increasing pressure for some time now. It seems that life outside the castle gates costs more than perhaps they had imagined. Gone are the days of guaranteed income from royal duties or family trusts. In their place came a lifestyle filled with California sunshine, expansive real estate security details, and the high costs of maintaining the image of independence. But independence, as many of us have learned through experience, often comes at a steeper price than anticipated. There's no denying that Harry and Meghan once carried the hopes of a new modern monarchy on their shoulders. She, a biracial American actress who had overcome obstacles of her own. He, the boy who had walked behind his mother's coffin and grown into a man determined not to repeat the emotional silences of the past. Together, they seemed poised to carve out something fresh. But over time, the weight of public scrutiny, private disagreements, and perhaps unmet expectations began to wear them down. And while love may have brought them together, the practical realities of sustaining a life apart from the institution that had raised Harry began to bear down on them. In this new chapter with their Netflix income no longer part of the picture, it appears that Harry may have done something many find difficult, especially when pride and hurt run deep. He reportedly reached out to his father, King Charles III. For those of us who are parents or grandparents, we understand the complexity of such a gesture. A son seeking help from his father, especially after years of public disagreements and deep emotional distance, is no small thing. And yet it also speaks to something enduring. Beneath the layers of royal protocol and public spectacle lies something simple, something very human: family. But here's where it gets more nuanced. There are whispers that this attempt at reconciliation wasn't driven purely by a change of heart or a sudden rush of affection. Rather, it's been suggested that the real catalyst was financial necessity. Without Netflix, without steady income, Harry and Meghan may find themselves facing the very thing they had tried to escape: a life dictated by others, this time not by palace tradition, but by the unforgiving arithmetic of modern economics. And so, reaching out to King Charles might not be about mending fences for the sake of emotional healing, but about survival. It's not our place to judge such a mode of life, after all, has a way of humbling all of us. There's something deeply sobering about watching this unfold, especially for those of us who remember the days when duty came before personal ambition in royal circles. When Queen Elizabeth, year after year, held fast to her sense of responsibility despite the cost to her own family. And now, in this generation, we see the pendulum swing towards something very different: a struggle between independence and security, between modern identity and ancestral expectations. It's worth pausing here to reflect on what this means for Harry and Meghan as individuals. Stepping away from one's roots, no matter how troubled those roots may be, is never an easy thing. and building something new from scratch, especially under the constant eye of the public, demands more than determination. It requires planning, sacrifice, and no small amount of grace. But perhaps what's most concerning is that the very tools they used to build their new life media contracts, personal branding, and public storytelling have now become fragile. The platform that once offered them freedom has now left them exposed. What happens next is anyone's guess. Some believe this financial shakeup may push the couple to reconsider their stance toward the royal family. Others believe it might deepen the cracks already visible in their marriage. Meghan, by all accounts, has struggled to find footing in a world that often views her through lenses of judgment and misunderstanding. And Harry, ever the rebel son, now finds himself pulled between the world he left and the life he tried to build. It would be easy to cast stones or offer unsolicited advice from afar. But maybe the wiser path, one that comes only with age and the softness time brings, is simply to watch with quiet empathy. To remember that behind the headlines and the titles are people trying to find their way. People like any of us who sometimes misstep, who sometimes reach too far or speak too soon, but who are still walking a road of their own making. In the end, whether or not the rift between Harry and King Charles is healed, whether or not the marriage between Harry and Meghan weathers this storm, what endures is the truth that family matters, not in the glossy magazine way, but in the moments when things fall apart, in the reaching out, the asking for help, the swallowing of pride. Perhaps, just perhaps, this crisis might become a turning point, not just for their bank accounts, but for their hearts. And if there's one thing we've learned through the decades, it's this: pride fades. Circumstances change, but the bonds of family, when they're given a chance, can surprise us with their quiet resilience. Whether across a kitchen table or a royal court, the language of reconciliation remains the same. And as we reflect on the shifting tides of this royal journey, many of us can't help but recall our own moments in life when the rug was pulled from beneath us, when plans carefully laid out fell apart and we had to face the world with fewer answers than questions. It's during those moments that true character is revealed. For Prince Harry and Meghan, this may be that defining moment. For all the press coverage they've received, for the praise, the criticism, and everything in between, what they face now is a test of endurance and humility. There is something quietly profound in watching a man who was born into such privilege now standing at a crossroads so familiar to everyday people: the fear of financial insecurity, the pressure to protect one's family, the longing for guidance from a parent. In that, Harry becomes more than a prince. He becomes a son, a husband, and a father. And for those of us who've raised children, made sacrifices, and tried to pass down lessons hard-won, we recognize that look in his eyes. The look of someone who must now choose between pride and peace. The question that remains, though, is whether this fragile bridge back to the monarchy will hold. King Charles, a man who has lived most of his life preparing to reign, is now watching his legacy unfold in ways no king could predict. A son once adored by the world is now the source of ongoing headlines and family tension. And yet, for all that Charles has endured, losing Diana, weathering criticism, and guiding the monarchy through modern storms, he may yet find in this chapter the opportunity to show the kind of fatherly grace that transcends crown and country. What we know, especially with age, is that reconciliation is never as simple as one phone call or one public statement. It requires time. It requires vulnerability on both sides. And most of all, it requires the willingness to listen, not just to words, but to pain that may have gone unspoken for years. Perhaps Meghan, too, finds herself reflecting on how her own choices have led her here, not in regret, but in deep contemplation. Being married into a world so steeped in tradition while trying to forge something new is no easy task. And while she has often been painted with broad strokes by both critics and admirers, the truth is likely far more complex. Behind her polished appearances is likely a woman grappling with what it means to belong and what it costs to break away. As the world watches this story unfold, we might do well to remember that beyond the cameras and the palaces and the power struggles, this is still a story about love, ambition, and the aching need to be understood. These are themes we've all lived through in one form or another, And perhaps that is why even now we remain drawn to this tale, not because of the titles, but because we see our own reflections in the struggle to reconcile who we are with where we come from. And if Harry and Meghan do manage to find solid ground again, not through fame or fortune, but through humility and healing, then maybe, just maybe, there's hope for us all. Because no matter how far we drift, the door back home is never truly closed. Sometimes it just takes longer to find the key.